The first thing that comes across to the player of FF9 is the high fantasy setting, which always has some quality of the medieval or Renaissance Europe about it. For me, as a student of literature, the quality that I most cherish about the world of FF9 is that it feels Shakespearean, almost Elizabethan. Our hero, Zidane, is part of a gang of thieves named Tantalus, and they fly under the radar by operating out of a theater company and putting on plays. Tantalus is famous throughout Lindblom for the productions they put on in that city's theater district, and it should not be lost on the player that the opening of the game begins with a little performance of its own. And no, it's not the Tantalus performance of I Want to Be Your Canary, during which they plan to kidnap the princess. It's when Zidane and the other members of Tantalus are waiting for their group leader, Baku, and get surprised by a mock battle. This is a simulated battle intended to test their strength. The fact that it's not real makes the battle performative in nature, a kind of rehearsal for the real battles to come. Baku, the director of the theater company, is, after all, wearing a beast's mask to disguise himself. He's in costume. Their secret meeting begins, during which they discuss the group's plans to kidnap Princess Garnet, and by what means? By putting on a play. Throughout the game, FF9 is consistently concerned with the line between reality and performance, simulation and authenticity. This thematic motif is visible not only in the larger narrative threads, but in the finer details as well, such as when Vivi has a fake ticket to the play. It's a kind of copy, a duplicate. Or when Steiner, discovering that Dagger has put a sleeping powder in everybody's food, starts acting out the symptoms, despite not having had any of the drug in his own plate. The purpose behind Tantalus's whole spectacle is, of course, to distract the queen and the audience for long enough to kidnap the princess. But by the time Zidane gets to her, we discover that Dagger is conveniently running away. In an unexpected subversion of events, she begs us to kidnap her. Suddenly, the kidnapping has transformed into something very different. The simulation of kidnapping. Dagger, as a willing participant, has turned this into a charade, a ruse. To carry this simulation even further, the princess who is now agreeing to be kidnapped is not even the real princess. As the game reveals much later, Dagger was originally a girl who only resembled the princess, and got adopted into the royal family as a substitute of her, a copy. Although she has effectively made that original Garnet's identity into her own, this still makes her a false duplicate. Zidane's intention to kidnap Princess Garnet has ironically spiraled into something much different, a simulated kidnapping of a simulated princess. The staging of this scene is also highly theatrical. Instead of showing the events from the game's typical aerial view, we are treated to a horizontal perspective, rather like it would have appeared in an intimate theater setting. The player is sort of hovering out where the audience would be, drawing attention to this scene's theatricality, and the fact that the characters are falling into roles. Zidane is agreeing to perform the role of kidnapper without really being one anymore, and Dagger the role of princess without really being one either. This is one of many examples in FF9 that plays with the idea of spectacle and spectator. Consider another scene between Beatrix and Steiner when their feelings for each other become known at last. After a missent letter finds its way into their hands, Beatrix and Steiner promptly fall into the role of lovers, though in reality, they're innocent victims to Eiko's plan of declaring her love for Zidane. In this case, the real purpose of the letters don't matter for Beatrix and Steiner. They fall into the script. The theatrical aspect of this scene is enhanced by the unknown presence of Blank, Marcus, and Eiko. It's also very interesting that of all people who could have been chosen to deliver this letter, it's Baku, the Tantalus theater director, that ultimately steps in. The whole scene is such a wonderful example of this game's visual imagery of spectacle and spectator, drawing the player's perspective into the fold by once again putting us into the position of a second audience. The characters, like a large ensemble, execute the scene in front of us in a space resembling a theater, so that our screens become something like a fourth wall. The game is playing with the fact that we're watching. Steiner has no idea that he's part of a performance and that everything around him is spectacle. And when Vivi eventually uses real magic during a fake conflict, the illusion is shattered, and Dagger is forced, strangely enough, to reveal herself as the princess who she really isn't at all. The original princess, who the player never actually meets, died in childhood, and a little girl named Sarah was thereafter taken in by the grieving king and queen because of her uncanny resemblance to the original Princess Garnet. We as players know that Dagger is the copy princess, but she does transcend her status as replacement and becomes legitimate. FF9 is deeply concerned with this question of what makes a good ruler, and the message being transmitted here is that identity plays a very small role. What really matters is the fulfillment of duty. In the end, nobody cares that Dagger isn't the real princess because she's fulfilled the obligations of that role so well. And she's comforted to an extent when she makes a confession to Beatrix that she isn't actually the real princess, and Beatrix says she's already known this. Garnet is constantly towing the line between authenticity and performance. When Dagger and friends reach the village of Dali, she finds herself in the position of needing to pretend that she's not Garnet when she's already really not Garnet. From here on, she starts putting on a different persona, experimenting with her behavior, adopting an accent, code switching to sound more like a person from the country. Of course, Dagger doesn't know yet that she isn't the real princess, but the thread running through all of this is that what you believe about yourself can really matter. Because even if you believe something about yourself that isn't strictly true, living life according to your belief could change reality. Dagger was a fake princess that became a real queen. In real life, we fall into and out of the observation of other people, like characters entering and exiting a stage, and our behavior no doubt changes based on who we believe to be watching us at any particular moment. We're not quite the same person in front of our teachers as we are in front of our friends, for example. There is therefore a sort of liberty that comes with being alone, being outside the gaze of other people. When we're no longer the spectacle of friends, family, and colleagues. When we're alone, we can stop pretending, whether consciously or subconsciously. There's a scene on Disc 1 that illustrates this idea of being alone as a kind of existential liberation. False duplicates, doubles, and disguises abound in this game. If spectacle and spectator are such crucial motifs of FF9, the eye ought to be a very powerful symbol. And sure enough, FF9 gives us the immense eye of the invincible to consider. The world as a whole has fallen into the role of spectacle for the invincible's distant observing eye, which provides the space of observation for Garland, patiently presiding over the decline of the planet's civilizations. As this huge eye gazes down upon the wars at hand, the game is perhaps making a thematic association with the phrase theater of war, a term used by the German military philosopher Karl von Clausewitz, denoting a space or stage wherein the rise and fall of nations plays out. The movement of soldiers on this vast stage are observed by kings, queens, and generals who operate in the wings in a non-performative directorial role. Kuja literally engages in theatrical speech during an encounter with Zidane just before a big battle. He says the first act is over, it's showtime. But war like theater, isn't always carried out with human beings themselves. It can be done by means of proxy, or you might say puppets, expendable, inanimate tools. The convenient thing about using puppets or tools in warfare is that you owe them nothing. Kuja and Zidane, however, don't know that they're as much a puppet as the Black Mages are. Created by Garland, Kuja and Zidane are a lot like Vivi. They're puppets who have become self-aware, autonomous actors. To put it one way, they're no longer following the script intended for them. We could look back to the West's oldest theatrical traditions for some insight into FF9's treatment of the performative aspect of human nature. In ancient Greece, the god of the theater was Dionysus, who was also the god of wine. It was believed by the ancient Greeks that when we drink wine, we don't simply get drunk and start acting strange. They thought our bodies were literally imbued with the spirit of Dionysus. They believed that drinking wine was therefore a way of communing with this god, who would inhabit the drinker's body and act through them. This is where the connection lies between theater and wine for Dionysus, because when one performs on stage, you're not entirely yourself, rather like getting drunk. FF9 is no stranger to this idea of the body serving as a kind of vessel. Vivi, after discovering with great sadness that he's a puppet imbued with life, wrestles with the fear that he's not an authentic individual. He seems to be exactly like every other Black Mage doll, except for the fact that he's conscious. The other Black Mages of Black Mage Village have also become self-aware and struggle with this fact, but perhaps it's the struggle that's important. All self-aware beings contend with this problem. Is our fate our own to decide, or are we playing a role that's been written for us? Are we following along to a script? Is our life being controlled by a creative design? I think it's the ability to ask this question that decides whether one is a free, self-aware thinking being. Because a robot following a program would probably not be able to think of the question in the first place. Am I free or am I a puppet? To be able to ask the question, am I free, suggests a sort of freedom of thought in the first place. The ability to become aware of the question of free will is an argument in favor of the existence of free will, unless it were a very cruel part of the design of a creator that we should be allowed to doubt our freedom without having freedom. Once one becomes capable of thinking about oneself and one's freedom to act, this is really the beginning of true consciousness. And along with consciousness comes the unsettling question of why one is conscious. Why are we here? Why are we this way and not some other way? Is what I am a mere accident, or does it have purpose? For Vivi, his self-awareness comes along with the knowledge that he's going to stop functioning, and as is the case with everybody else, death is the end of the charade. But in order to get there, one has to act. They have to fake it until they make it. Vivi becomes the beliefs that he acts upon, but these beliefs must be coupled with action, or else the potential is never realized, an idea explored by Shakespeare in Hamlet. For the 5 long acts of Shakespeare's masterpiece, Hamlet faces the difficult question of what to do. He thinks his father has urged him on to revenge, but he's not sure. It could have been a demon or a delusion. From this point on in the play, Hamlet's wavering beliefs are a handicap that prevent him from acting, and it should come as no surprise that the play of Hamlet is, like FF9, interested in plays within plays, and the fascinatingly strange link between authenticity and performance. FF9 ends rather like it begins. Another play is being staged in Alexandria, with Dagger in the audience. At the end of the play, the lead actor is revealed to be Zidane, who rushes off the stage into the audience and embraces Dagger, momentarily collapsing the binary of spectacle and spectator, perhaps to signal that when two people truly love each other, they no longer feel that need to pretend. It's a wonderfully artistic way of ending the story, right where it began, like a mirror shining back on itself.